We've got more leaks for the upcoming NCAA football video game that EA Sports is going to be putting out in a few months. Now, we've been getting a lot of information about this game for the last couple of years since it was announced, and pretty much every month or so we get more leaks surrounding this game because Matt Brown is continuing to put out more information, and a good bit of this information EA has already spoken on themselves and confirmed, so he's definitely in the know, and he's been getting a lot of information from different college institutions about this game. Basically, what he does is he reaches out to these college institutions and he asks them, what are they sending EA for the game? A lot of this is public record and you can request it, and they're sending him all of the email exchanges that they've had with EA showing the different things that they have sent over to them to be in the game. But on top of that, Matt Brown also has a source inside of EA Sports that leaks little tidbits of information to him from time to time as well. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, he put out more information which we covered on this channel, but since then, he also did an interview about an hour long with another YouTuber by the name of Tubby Light. I will have his interview linked in the description below if you want to watch the entire thing, but basically I'm going to break down a lot of the important points that he talked about in that interview. Now, some of the things he talked about we already know. He kind of reaffirmed some of the things that he himself has leaked, but he also put out some new information throughout this interview that's really interesting, and we're going to cover all of it in this video. And if you never want to miss out on any of the future updates surrounding this game as it's getting closer to release, make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on so you never miss any of these important videos. Now, the first thing that he talks about in this interview is just kind of reaffirming the release date, that it is summer of 2023. It's expected to be out in July. For some reason, a lot of people have their doubts that this game is ever coming out, but EA's CEO even spoke on this recently and said that they're making great progress, that they're ahead of schedule at this point, and everything is lining up for them to release in the summer of 2023. And while they did push it back a year because they were originally aiming for summer 2022, this isn't one of those games that's going to continue to get pushed back over and over and over because they got a lot of time and money already invested in it. They want to get this game out so they can start making money off of it. What Matt Brown said in this interview was their goal is to make this game the best quality that they can possibly make it. And from everything that he's heard surrounding this game lately, he says that EA Sports are not projecting any other delays. And he went on to say he would be very surprised if this game was delayed based on the things that he's hearing from inside EA. He says there's a lot of outside pressure and investor pressure to get this game out now. There's a lot of money that has been put into this. The EA investors, the people at the top, they know how much money this game is going to make because it has not been out in so long. They know how hungry people are for this game, and the last thing they're trying to do is further delay it past 2023. But hold up, stop right there really quickly. If you want to win some money and you think you know sports like even a little bit, then you need to be signed up at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy's pick'em game is one of my favorite things to play while I'm watching sports. They have a wide variety of player stats, and all you simply have to do is either pick higher or lower, and if you know sports at all, this is pretty easy, and if they hit, you win money. And the best part about Underdog Fantasy is if you sign up using my promo code RAY, they're going to give you a free play right off the bat. For this Thursday's game, it's going to be Derrick Henry to get a single yard. And if you sign up after Thursday and you want to play for Sunday, they're going to give you Lamar Jackson to get a single yard. For Monday Night Football, it'll be Justin Herbert. And no matter when you sign up, there's always going to be a free play like this, but they also double your first deposit up to $500, which is insane, meaning however much you deposit up to $500, they give you that same amount back in your account for free to play with, and you can turn that into real winnings. He then goes on to talk about the different types of teams we can expect to be in the new NCAA game. He said every FBS institution will be in the game. So we know there was a point in time early on where some schools were on the fence about being in the game. Some specifically came out and said that they would not be in the game if the players could not get paid. I believe Notre Dame was one of those schools. But now that they have that in place, every FBS institution will be in the game. And he also said that not every single one has signed the licensing yet. Some schools were holding out till the players got paid, but those schools are still participating and sending EA the assets. This includes schools like James Madison, Jacksonville State, and Sam Houston. So the fact that these schools are participating and sending EA the assets means that they have every intention on being in the game, even if they haven't fully signed the licensing yet. Now, the next thing I've seen a lot of people ask about, and that is the FCS. And the plan for now is to not include FCS teams at launch, but the idea is that they will be included included later at some point. The plan for now is to focus on making sure that they get all of the FBS institutions in first. Now, the FCS teams could come in a later update throughout the year, or it could possibly be something that they release with the next iteration of the game, which I assume they're going to release one every year like they do with Madden. But I kind of get the logic on this, where they need to make sure they get the FBS in first. They need to make sure they get all of that in, get all of the presentation for those teams, the rivalries, the fight songs, the crowds, the stadium, the atmosphere, because we know that they're putting a lot into that this year. So make sure you get all of that in first. Make sure you get all of that nailed down. Then for your next go round, work on getting the FCS teams in. But the fact that they said that they do have the plan to eventually put them in is a good thing. Now, in terms of all the schools being in the game, Matt Brown further went on to said that everybody knows that the pushback from the athletes and the fans would be very strong if their teams were not in the game. So there's virtually nothing that can stop these schools from being in the game at this point. If the athletes are getting paid, every school is going to eventually be in the game. Because with this being such a big deal, imagine if your favorite school wasn't in the game. Imagine if Notre Dame wasn't in the game and you are a huge Notre Dame fan. Imagine how strong the pushback would be from that huge fan base and even the athletes that play on that team that want to be able to play as themselves in this football game. That pressure, combined with the fact that athletes can actually be paid, means that every school is going to be in this game. Now, in terms of which actual players are going to be in the game, this is pretty interesting because obviously EA is not going to be able to license literally every single player that's in college football. It's just way too many people. But this is what Matt Brown said in the interview. He said the plan is to license every single scholarship football player that's on a roster for next season. So that's about 85 players per team for 134 teams, which is a pretty big number of people in my opinion. They're doing this through their One Team Partners, which is a company that does group licensing. They give a unified contract to all players to sign if they want to opt in, and it's not feasible for EA to negotiate with every single individual athlete, even if some players do have a higher market value, like a player like Caleb Williams, for example. Now, he won't be in this game because he's going to go to the NFL, but say he was, obviously his market value is higher than the average scholarship athlete. But the problem with that is if you start negotiating with anybody individually, then everybody's going to want to do that. And then where do you draw the line? Who is able to get an individual deal versus who isn't? So the really only feasible way to do this when you have such a large group of players is you have to work out a final number for everybody. Now, the rumor that's been going around is that every player would get $500 to be in the game. Now, for the top end guys, obviously that's crazy underpaid, but for the average guy, it's about market value because most of the average college football players, the average fan doesn't even know who they are, right? We know who the Heisman guys are, we know who the quarterbacks are on the good teams, but most of the fans aren't going to know every single player. So their market value isn't going to be the same as those big name players. However, Matt Brown said the actual pay range can be anywhere from $500 to $1,200 per player. He said that talking with athletes, pretty much none of them even want to opt out for the most part. He said, in fact, most players that he has talked to said that they would do it for free because they just want to be in the game, which makes sense. If you're a teenager playing in college or a 20-year-old playing in college, being in the game to you is probably more cool than making an extra $1,000 off being in the game. Now, agents of some of the higher profile athletes may want them to opt out, but it seems as though most players want in regardless. So most of these scholarship players for every team, the most important players that you would know on your team, should be in the game if everything goes according to plan. Now, in terms of more news coming out about this game, because let's be honest, most of the news that we have gotten has been from Matt Brown. EA has spoken on it a little bit, but they've been pretty quiet overall, which could be a good thing because that means they're taking it very seriously and they want to make sure that they have everything in line before they start revealing all the big stuff. But Matt Brown did said that the people at EA said they wanted to share more about the game during this college football season. They wanted to publicly speak about it. They wanted to share some images and some motion capture during the season, but it hasn't happened quite yet. He said there is some speculation that towards the end of the season they may tease some things, possibly during the national championship game. EA is already not too happy with the amount of info that is out due to leaks, due to working with these public institutions. So again, the reason this stuff is allowed to be leaked is because they're working with all of these different public college institutions, and when you do that and you're sending this info back and forth, a lot of that info is public record. So again, that's how he's able to get all this information because he can request these records, and they don't have to send it to him, but a lot of the institutions do send it to him because technically there's nothing wrong with doing it. And as of right now, EA is kind of a little upset that as much info has come out about the game because they have not put it out themselves. And if you know EA, they do not like when other people are leaking their information. They like to be in control of the messaging of what you know and when you know it, which is really most companies anyway. There's nothing really wrong with that because this is something you're working on. You want it to come out the way you want it to come out on your timing. So knowing that all this stuff is leaking is kind of putting a little bit more pressure on them to speak more publicly about these things sooner rather than later. And during the national championship game would definitely be a good time to start teasing the game because that's when the most eyes are going to be on college football for the championship game. So definitely, if we have not heard anything publicly from EA yet, expect to when the college football playoff or the championship is going on. Now let's talk about some game mode stuff because I know that's the biggest thing outside of gameplay for a lot of people, especially as it pertains to things like Dynasty mode. And Matt Brown said this in the interview. He said that EA has actually reached out to several experts in college athletics for consulting, former and current coaches, along with athletes to talk about recruiting and NIL because they want to make that a big part of Dynasty mode. They want the recruiting and the NIL factors that is now a big deal in college football to be represented in the game. Now, obviously, we had recruiting in NCAA 14, which a lot of people love, but they want to make it better. This is 10 years later. They want to do more and they want to make sure that NIL is included. So they've been talking to a lot of former coaches, current coaches, former athletes, consulting because they want to make sure they can make this as detailed as possible, which is really good to hear. Matt Brown said Dynasty is the flagship mode and they are spending a lot of time on it. We kind of already knew that, but it's good to hear it reiterated. He said that they know that that's the mode people want to be playing. It's not going to be exactly like 14, however, which some people might get scared when they hear that because a lot of people are saying just literally copy and paste 14, update the players and the graphics, but that's not really how they're approaching it. Now, Matt Brown did said the major focuses of the dev team is realism and how they can modernize the recruiting process and roster management to what college football looks like right now. Things like the transfer portal and NIL is going to be incorporated, obviously. And back in NCAA 14, I believe there was a transfer portal, but it's so much different now than it was then. The transfer portal is a much different animal now, and NIL did not exist back in NCAA 14, which is a major factor now in recruiting. He said that recruiting will be different than 14 because recruiting in real life is different, which we just talked about. During the process, they want players to feel connected and excited about the recruits that they're going to be playing with the following year, and to create a feedback loop in recruiting that will provide constant rewards. Transferring was barely a thing in previous Dynasty modes, but now it will be a significant part of the off-season in Dynasty mode. There will be a lot of player movement just like in real life. Now, he also went on to talk briefly about some other modes. He said Road to Glory will obviously be there. He said Ultimate Team will be there in some capacity as well, which is really not a surprise because NCAA 14 had an Ultimate Team. And NCAA 14 is one of the best football games of all time. So I don't think just because it has an Ultimate Team, that means that that's a problem for the game. Because as long as they're focusing on gameplay, realism, and Dynasty is the most important, which is the stuff we've heard by far the most about, the game should be fine. He also went on to say that the game is going to be on new consoles only, which I think a lot of us know by now, but some people might not know. It's not going to obviously be released on PS4 and Xbox One because by the time this game comes out, the current gen consoles that we're on now will have been out for about 4 years, so they're not going to put that game on the older consoles. PC, he said he's not sure, but he does anticipate it being on PC since EA has been putting Madden on PC, and he said it will not be available on the Switch, which isn't really a surprise because once again, Madden isn't available on the Switch either. In terms of some presentation things, Matt Brown said that ESPN and College Game Day will be a part of the game, which is super important. Now, obviously, we knew ESPN would probably be involved, but we didn't know if College Game Day would be, and that's actually really good to hear. He said that Kirk Herbstreit, Desmond Howard, and others have already done recording for it, so we already know that those are two names that are going to be in the game for commentating, and even others on top of that. So again, really good stuff to hear, especially when we think about Madden and how we've had the same commentators for like 8-9 years now. So just having a football game with just different voices is going to be such a refreshing change. Matt Brown said he's not sure if any other studio will be a part of this, but he expects it to be heavily ESPN focused, which makes sense because that's how NCAA games always were. He went on to say that EA has been asking the schools for a lot, which we've covered some of this in previous videos. He said they want all the historic uniforms. Schools are being asked to send in multiple uniforms, multiple helmets, and they want to make sure that they're really showcasing all the different types of uniforms that these different schools wear on a given season. He said there's interest in face scanning some of the big name players that are expected to be around for multiple seasons as well. So we may not see them face scan some of the bigger name guys that we know are going to be leaving the following year, but when you think of like an Arch Manning, for example, who just came into college this year and he's not even playing yet, that's a guy that you would probably be looking to face scan because you know he's going to be around for at least 3 years in the game, and at some point he's going to be the starter and he's going to be a pretty big name. So guys like that are coming in that you know are going to be around and are likely going to be big names because they were so highly recruited, they're going to try to face scan some of those bigger names in the game, which I think will just add more realism to it because that's not something we even had back in the old NCAA games. Matt Brown was also asked about Team Builder and if that was going to be included in the game because we know that was such a huge part of NCAA 14, and he said he has no info on the Team Builder yet. It's one of the few things that he has no info on. If I had to assume, I don't think we're going to get Team Builder in the same way that NCAA 14 had it, but I fully expect the game to at least have a created team and something better than what Madden has for sure. In terms of some more presentation things, he said that everybody is getting a brand new 3D render of their stadium. They're asking for thousands of photos of the stadium. They want the dorms in the background, the locker rooms. They're asking for the mascots and the fan information because they want to put real fans in the game. They want all the fight songs, what they play pre-game, the sound effects that they play during the game, the student chants, what they do during big parts of the game. They're having big focuses on rivalry games, the trophies, the sponsors. They want all of the gameplay presentation to highlight these different events. So that's really good to hear because, again, if you're used to Madden, we just don't really get any of that in Madden. Now, as the interview was getting near the end, he kind of wrapped up some things by saying, basically, they're spending a ton of money to make this game. He said 0% of the code from the last NCAA game is usable. The whole thing is being rebuilt. So they're spending a ton of money to rebuild the game. They're spending a ton of money on licensing all of the schools. They're spending a ton of money to license all of the big players. And they're also trying to license a good bit of the music, like Enter Sandman for Virginia Tech and Jump Around for Wisconsin, for example. They're also licensing bowl games. They're licensing these sponsors that sponsor some of the big rivalry games and much more than that. So basically what this means is because they're putting this ungodly amount of money and time into the game, it's kind of further proof that they want to get this game out sooner rather than later, and they also want to make sure that this game is a hit when it drops. So they're making sure that they're covering all their bases with this game because they've had so much time to work on it. He said the people working on the game care very deeply for the sport itself, and they can't just make a carbon copy of Madden. They know that. There's too much dev work happening, and the number one reason they delayed the game is because they know that they only get one chance to make a good first impression. If it sucks, it's going to suck on its own merit, not because it's like Madden, which I think is important because, again, the game could suck. A game could always suck. We've seen companies spend tons of time on games and they still suck. Just because they're spending a ton of time, a ton of money, and they care doesn't mean the game's going to be good. But I like that he goes on to say that if the game sucks, it's going to suck as a standalone game, not because it's a reskin Madden game and it sucks because the same problems that Madden has, which is a really important distinction. That's it for today. Again, make sure to sign up at Underdog Fantasy, take advantage of their new user specials and the $500 deposit match. You just can't beat it.